30,000 feet
Your
above the ground,
doesn't
in the
belong
pressurized
here.
cabin of Flight 447, a 10-year-old girl sat perfectly still in seat 3A while a flight attendant towered over her, eyes blazing with contempt. "I don't care who your parents think they are," the woman hissed, her voice dripping with venom. "You need to move to the back of the plane where you belong." The child looked up, her dark eyes calm despite the tears threatening to spill over. When she spoke, her voice was steady, measured, and carried a weight that seemed impossible for someone so young. "Ma'am, this is your final warning. But to understand how we got here, to understand how a 10-year-old child came to issue a warning to a grown woman who had no idea what was about to happen, we need to go back. Back to that morning 8 hours earlier, when the sun first broke over Martha's Vineyard and a little girl named Zara Richardson woke up in her bedroom, unaware that this day would change everything. The Richardson estate sat on 12 acres of pristine waterfront property, the kind of place that whispered old money and quiet power. But inside Zara's bedroom you'd never know it. Sure, the room was large, but it looked like any other 10-year-old space. Posters of her favorite singers on the walls. A desk cluttered with homework and colored pencils. A bookshelf overflowing with novels about adventure and mystery. But if you looked closer, you'd notice the details that made Zara different. The scale models of commercial aircraft suspended from her ceiling, each one painted with meticulous care. The framed photograph on her nightstand of a beautiful black woman in a pilot's uniform, her smile radiant, her eyes full of life. And hanging on a special hook near her mirror, a pair of pilot's wings, polished to a shine, with the name Captain Jennifer Richardson engraved on the back. Zara's mother had been gone for 2 years, but her presence filled every corner of that room. That morning, Zara moved through her routine with the kind of efficiency that would make a military officer proud. She showered, brushed her teeth, and stood in front of her closet choosing her outfit with care. She selected a navy blue cardigan over a white blouse, pressed khaki pants, and her favorite pair of sneakers. Her hair was pulled back into 2 neat puffs, each one carefully shaped by Mrs. Chin, the family's housekeeper who had become something like a grandmother to Zara in the years since her mother's death. Mrs. Chun was a 72-year-old Chinese woman who'd worked for the Richardson family since before Zara was born. She had thin hands that were always cold and a warm smile that could make you feel safe no matter how scared you were. That morning, she hovered in Zara's doorway, wringing those cold hands together, her face creased with worry. "Are you absolutely sure about flying alone, Zara? Your father could send the jet. You could wait one more day until he's back from Singapore." Zara zipped up her small rolling suitcase and turned to face Mrs. Chen with a patient smile. She'd had this conversation before. Many times. "Mrs. Chen, I'll be fine. I've flown alone dozens of times. Besides, it's just a few hours to Atlanta. Grandma Ruth is waiting and I promised I'd be there for her birthday. She's turning 80. I can't miss it." Mrs. Chen moved into the room and placed both hands on Zara's shoulders, looking into her eyes with an intensity that made the little girl pay attention. "You are so much like your mother. Too brave for your own good sometimes." Zara's smile flickered, and for just a moment, the mature facade cracked and she was just a little girl missing her mom. But she straightened her shoulders and nodded. "Mama always said being brave doesn't mean you're not scared. It means you do the thing even when you are scared." Mrs. Chen pulled her into a hug that smelled like jasmine tea and vanilla, and Zara let herself sink into it for just a moment before pulling away. There was a car waiting. A plane to catch. A grandmother expecting her. Before she left her room, Zara walked to the photograph of her mother and pressed 2 fingers to her lips, then to the glass. "I'll make you proud, Mama." The private car that took Zara to the airport was driven by Thomas, a quiet man in his 50s who'd been with the family for years. He didn't try to make conversation, which Zara appreciated. She sat in the back seat and watched Martha's Vineyard slide past her window, the morning light turning everything golden. Her phone buzzed. A text from her father. "So sorry I can't be there, Princess. Business in Singapore is taking longer than expected. I'll try to make it back tonight. You sure you're okay flying commercial?" Zara typed back quickly. "I'm fine, Dad. Grandma needs me there. Focus on your meeting. Love you." 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, then appeared again. Finally, "You're the strongest person I know. Love you more than all the stars. Call me when you land." Zara stared at that message for a long time. Her father, Marcus Richardson, was a complicated man. After Zara's mother died in a small plane crash over the Adirondacks, he'd thrown himself into work with an intensity that scared everyone around him. He'd taken the small regional airline he'd been building and turned it into an empire. Richardson Aviation Group now owned 3 major airlines, employed over 15,000 people, and was valued at somewhere north of $8 billion. But money and power couldn't fill the hole that Jennifer Richardson had left behind. Marcus knew that. So he'd made a decision that confused everyone in his social circle. Despite being a billionaire, despite owning private jets and having access to every luxury imaginable, Marcus insisted that Zara live as normally as possible. She went to public school. She flew commercial. She had chores. She earned her allowance. The world won't treat you gently because of your name, he told her once, his eyes haunted by memories of his own childhood growing up poor in Detroit. You need to know what real people experience. You need to understand the lives of the people who work for us, who fly on our planes, who trust us with their safety. If you don't understand them, you can't serve them. So Zara had become accustomed to a strange double life. At home, she was the daughter of a billionaire, living in a mansion with staff and security and every advantage money could buy. But out in the world, she was just another black girl trying to navigate a society that often didn't see her clearly. She'd learned to read people quickly. To notice the subtle shifts in expression when someone realized she was alone. The assumptions people made about where she came from, who her parents were, whether she belonged in certain spaces. Her mother had prepared her for this. "Baby girl," Jennifer used to say, "the world is going to underestimate you. They'll see your skin color and your age and think they know your whole story. Let them. And then show them who you really are." Zara missed her mother with an ache that never really went away. It just became something she carried, like her backpack or her name. The airport was busy that morning. Logan International was always chaotic, but Zara navigated it with the ease of someone who'd done this 100 times before. She checked in at the kiosk, printed her boarding pass and made her way through security. The TSA agent, a middle-aged black man with kind eyes and graying temples, recognized her from previous trips. "Miss Richardson, flying solo again today?" "Yes, sir. Heading to Atlanta to see my grandmother." He smiled and waved her through. "You tell Miss Ruth happy birthday for me. My mama just turned 80 last month. It's a blessing." "I will, sir. Thank you." Zara found her gate and settled into one of the uncomfortable plastic chairs to wait. She pulled out a book from her backpack, a biography of Bessie Coleman, the first black woman to earn a pilot's license. Zara had read it 3 times already, but she kept coming back to it. There was something about Bessie's determination, her refusal to let the world tell her what she couldn't do, that resonated deep in Zara's chest. As she read, she became aware of the other passengers gathering at the gate. This was something her mother had taught her to do. Always know your environment, baby girl. Not out of fear but out of awareness. The best pilots are the ones who see everything. So Zara saw the college student, probably 19 or 20, with earbuds in and a laptop covered in social justice stickers. He was tall and lanky with warm brown skin and an afro that defied gravity. He kept glancing around the gate area with the energy of someone who was always looking for a story. She saw the elderly couple, white-haired and moving slowly, holding hands like they were afraid they might lose each other in the crowd. The woman wore a cardigan despite the warm day, and the man kept patting his pocket where Zara assumed he kept their boarding passes. They had the air of people who'd been together so long they'd become one person split into 2 bodies. She saw the businessman in the expensive suit, probably mid-40s, black, with tired eyes and the kind of watch that cost more than most people's cars. He worked on his laptop with the focused intensity of someone who never really stopped working, even at the airport. And she saw the young mother, probably mid-20s, Hispanic, with a baby that couldn't have been more than 6 months old. The mother looked exhausted, dark circles under her eyes, and the baby was already fussing even though they hadn't boarded yet. Zara felt a pang of sympathy. Flying with a baby must be incredibly stressful. When the gate agent announced boarding, Zara stood and smoothed down her cardigan. First class was called first, and she made her way down the jetway with her small rolling suitcase, her backpack secure on her shoulders. The flight attendants stood at the entrance to the plane, smiling their professional smiles and greeting passengers. There were 2 of them. The first was a young man, probably late 20s, with warm brown skin, dark hair, and a name tag that read Carlos Martinez. He had the kind of face that looked like it smiled a lot, with laugh lines around his eyes. "Welcome aboard. Let me help you with that bag." "Thank you, but I can manage," Zara said politely, but Carlos was already taking her suitcase to stow it in the overhead compartment. The second flight attendant was a woman, probably in her early 50s, white, with blonde hair pulled back so tightly it seemed to stretch her face. Her makeup was applied with precision, but it couldn't hide the hard set of her mouth or the coldness in her blue eyes. Her name tag read Sandra Whitmore, and when she looked at Zara, something flickered across her face. Surprise. Confusion. Disapproval. It happened so quickly that Zara almost missed it, but she'd learned to watch for these moments. The brief recalibration people went through when they saw a young black girl walking into first class. "Are you sure you're in the right section, honey?" Sandra's voice was sweet like artificial sugar, the kind that left a bitter aftertaste. Zara held up her boarding pass, seat 3A clearly printed. "Yes, ma'am. This is my seat." Sandra took the boarding pass and examined it like she was looking for evidence of forgery. Carlos returned from stowing Zara's bag and glanced over Sandra's shoulder. "Sandra, her ticket is legitimate. I checked when I stowed her bag." Something tightened in Sandra's expression, but she handed the boarding pass back with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Of course, sweetie. I just want to make sure you're in the right place. Where are your parents?" "My father is traveling on business. I'm flying alone to visit my grandmother in Atlanta." "Flying alone?" Sandra's eyebrows rose. "That's very unusual for someone so young." Zara had this conversation before too. She kept her voice even and polite. "I fly alone regularly, ma'am. I'm very comfortable with it." "Well, aren't you grown up?" Sandra said, and there was something in her tone that made the words sound like an insult. "We'll try to keep an eye on you during the flight. Make sure you don't get into any trouble." Zara felt heat rise in her cheeks but kept her expression neutral. "That won't be necessary. But thank you for your concern." She moved past Sandra to her seat, 3A, a window seat in the third row of first class. As she settled in, she was aware of Sandra watching her, whispering something to Carlos that Zara couldn't quite hear. Carlos looked uncomfortable and shook his head before moving to greet other boarding passengers. Sandra stayed at the entrance, her smile returning for the other first-class passengers but something else entirely lingering in her eyes when she glanced back at Zara. The businessman Zara had noticed at the gate came down the aisle and took seat 4B right behind her. He glanced at Zara, then at Sandra, and something knowing passed across his face. He'd seen exchanges like that before. The elderly couple she'd noticed were seated across the aisle in 3C and 3D. The woman caught Zara's eye and smiled warmly. "Well, hello there, sweetheart. Are you traveling all by yourself?" Before Zara could answer, Sandra appeared with glasses of champagne for the couple, her professional mask firmly in place. "Welcome aboard, Mr. and Mrs. Morrison. It's wonderful to have you flying with us today. Can I get you anything else?" The contrast between how Sandra spoke to the Morrisons and how she'd spoken to Zara was stark. Mrs. Morrison noticed it too. She frowned slightly but accepted the champagne. "Actually, could you bring this young lady something to drink as well?" "What's your name, dear?" "Zara, ma'am." "And that's very kind, but I don't need anything right now." "Nonsense. You must be thirsty. Miss." Mrs. Morrison glanced at Sandra's name tag. "Miss Whitmore, could you bring Zara something? What would you like, honey? Juice? Soda? Ginger ale would be lovely." "Thank you, Mrs. Morrison." Sandra's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Of course. One ginger ale coming right up." But as she walked away, Zara heard her mutter something under her breath. She couldn't make out the words, but the tone was clear enough. Mr. Morrison leaned over to his wife and spoke quietly, but Zara's ears were sharp. "Patricia, did you notice how she—" "I noticed, Robert. I noticed." The rest of the passengers boarded over the next 20 minutes. The young mother with the crying baby ended up in coach, and Zara could hear the baby's wails even from first class. The college student was back there too, probably couldn't afford first class on a student budget. When everyone was settled, the captain's voice came over the intercom. Deep, authoritative calm. "Good morning, folks. This is Captain Michael Torres. Welcome aboard Flight 447 with service to Atlanta. We're looking at clear skies and smooth flying today. Should have you on the ground in just about 2.5 hours. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the flight." As the plane pushed back from the gate, Zara looked out the window at the airport falling away behind them. She thought about her grandmother, about the party waiting in Atlanta, about her father stuck in Singapore feeling guilty that he couldn't be there. She thought about her mother who used to say that every flight was a small miracle. Tons of metal defying gravity through nothing but physics and human ingenuity. Her mother had loved flying more than almost anything. Zara pulled out her tablet as the plane taxied toward the runway. She had homework to finish, math problems that weren't going to solve themselves. She was a straight-A student, not because anyone pushed her but because she pushed herself. Her mother had dropped out of college when she got pregnant with Zara, putting her dreams on hold to raise a baby. She'd gone back later, earned her degree and her pilot's license while working 2 jobs, but those lost years had haunted her. "Don't wait to chase your dreams, baby girl," she told Zara over and over. "Every day you wait is a day you can't get back." So Zara didn't wait. She studied hard. She read everything. She asked questions. She was 10 years old and already thinking about college, about the future, about what she wanted to build with her life. The plane took off, that moment of defying gravity that always made Zara's stomach flip. But instead of fear, she felt the same thing her mother used to feel. Wonder. The miracle of flight. Once they reached cruising altitude and the seatbelt sign dinged off, Carlos came down the aisle with a tray of drinks and snacks. He brought Zara her ginger ale in a plastic cup while the other passengers received actual glassware. Zara noticed but said nothing. Carlos noticed too. He looked embarrassed. "I'm sorry about that," he said quietly, leaning down. "That's not our usual service." "It's okay," Zara said, because what else could she say? But Carlos looked toward the galley where Sandra was preparing the drink cart and shook his head. When he walked away, Zara heard him say something to Sandra. Their voices were low, but Zara caught fragments. "That's a child, Sandra, legitimate passenger. There's no reason." Sandra's response was sharp. "I know how to do my job, Carlos. Why don't you focus on yours?" Mrs. Morrison had been watching this exchange too. She leaned across the aisle. "Sweetheart, is this your first time flying alone?" "No, ma'am. I fly alone pretty regularly." "And do flight attendants usually treat you like that?" Zara considered her answer carefully. The truth was, yes, she often encountered skepticism and microaggressions when she flew alone. People questioned whether she belonged in first class. They asked where her parents were with suspicion rather than concern. They watched her like they expected her to break something or cause a scene. But Zara had learned that complaining often made things worse. It labeled you as difficult, sensitive, someone who played the race card. "Sometimes people are surprised to see a kid flying first class," she said diplomatically. "It's okay. I understand." Mr. Morrison shook his head. "Understanding doesn't make it right, young lady." Before Zara could respond, Sandra appeared with the drink cart, her professional smile plastered on her face. She served the Morrisons with elaborate courtesy, offering them premium snacks, showing them the menu of in-flight meals, asking if they needed anything at all. When she got to Zara, the temperature in her voice dropped several degrees. "Do you need anything?" Not, "Can I get you anything?" or "What can I bring you?" Just the bare minimum question delivered with barely concealed impatience. "No thank you, ma'am. I'm fine." Sandra moved on without another word. Zara opened her tablet and tried to focus on her math homework, but she was aware of the tension in the cabin. The businessman behind her kept glancing up from his laptop, watching the interactions between Sandra and Zara with increasingly obvious disapproval. The flight continued and for a while things seemed calm. Zara worked on her homework. The Morrisons read their magazines. The businessman typed away on his laptop. But beneath the surface something was building. A pressure that would eventually have to release. After about an hour, Zara needed to use the restroom. She unbuckled her seatbelt and stood, but before she could step into the aisle, the plane hit a pocket of turbulence. Not severe, just enough to make the cabin shake slightly. The seatbelt sign dinged on, and the captain's voice came over the intercom. "Flight attendants, please be seated. We've got a little rough air ahead." Zara had already been standing. She quickly moved to sit back down, but Sandra appeared seemingly out of nowhere, her face tight with anger. "Sit down. Immediately." Zara froze, startled by the venom in Sandra's voice. Other passengers looked up, surprised. "I was just going to." "I said sit down. Children need to follow the rules, especially when the seatbelt sign is on. What if we'd hit more turbulence? What if you'd gotten hurt?" The words themselves weren't unreasonable. But the way Sandra said them, the fury in her voice, the way she loomed over Zara like she was a disobedient animal that needed to be corrected, that was what made it wrong. Zara's face burned with embarrassment as she slid back into her seat. Sandra stood over her for a moment longer, making sure everyone in first class saw the reprimand, before returning to her jump seat. Mrs. Morrison reached across the aisle and patted Zara's hand. "Don't worry, dear. You didn't do anything wrong." But Zara felt the eyes of other passengers on her. Some sympathetic, some curious, and she felt something else too. Something she'd been trying to suppress since the moment Sandra had questioned her boarding pass. Anger. Not the hot, explosive kind, but the cold, calculated kind that her father had taught her was far more effective. "When someone underestimates you," Marcus had told her once, "don't get mad and loud. Get quiet and strategic. The loudest person in the room is rarely the most powerful." So Zara sat quietly, her hands folded in her lap, her face carefully neutral. But inside she was thinking, calculating, remembering every slight, every microaggression, Every dismissive word. The turbulence passed quickly. The seatbelt sign turned off. And Zara stood again, this time making sure to move slowly, deliberately, so no one could accuse her of being reckless. But Sandra was there immediately, blocking the aisle. "Where do you think you're going?" "The restroom, ma'am." Sandra's lips pursed into a thin line. She looked at Zara with something that went beyond mere disapproval. It was contempt. Pure and undisguised. "The first-class restrooms are for premium passengers." The words hung in the air like smoke. Mr. Morrison inhaled sharply. The businessman behind Zara stopped typing, his fingers frozen over his keyboard. Zara kept her voice level. "I am a premium passenger, ma'am. My seat is in first class. The restrooms in coach are perfectly adequate. I'm sure you'll find them more suitable." The implication was clear to everyone listening. More suitable. As in, more appropriate for someone like you. Someone who doesn't really belong here. The businessman stood up from his seat, his tall frame suddenly imposing. His face was dark with anger, his professional composure cracking. "Excuse me, but she is a first-class passenger. Her ticket entitles her to use any restroom on this aircraft." Sandra turned to him with ice in her eyes. "Sir, I'm handling this situation. Please return to your seat. This isn't a situation to handle. This is a child asking to use the bathroom. Sir, I will not ask you again. Sit down or I will have to report you to the captain for interfering with crew members performing their duties." The businessman looked like he wanted to argue more, his jaw clenched, his hands balled into fists at his sides. But Zara spoke softly, diffusing the tension. "It's okay, sir. Really. I don't mind using the one in the back." She didn't want to cause a scene. Didn't want this man to get in trouble for defending her. Didn't want to be the difficult passenger that people would talk about later, shaking their heads about entitled children who thought they owned the plane. So she walked down the aisle, through the curtain that separated first class from coach, past rows and rows of passengers crammed into smaller seats, babies crying, people trying to sleep with their heads against the windows, the air growing warmer and more stale the further back she went. The walk felt like a punishment. Like Sandra was making sure Zara knew her place. And maybe she was. In coach, Zara could see the young mother she'd noticed at the gate, struggling with her crying baby. The woman looked up as Zara passed, and their eyes met for just a moment. There was something in that look. Recognition. Solidarity. The shared understanding of women who'd been made to feel small by people who had power over them. When Zara emerged from the bathroom a few minutes later, the college student with the laptop was standing in the galley area, getting water. He caught her eye and shook his head slowly, disgust written all over his face. "That was messed up," he said quietly, just loud enough for Zara to hear. Zara just nodded. What could she say? That yes, it was messed up, but it happened all the time? That this was just one more small indignity in a lifetime that would be full of them? She walked back to first class, her head held high even though inside she felt humiliated. When she returned to her seat, Mrs. Morrison looked troubled. More than troubled. She looked angry. "Sweetheart, that woman has no right to treat you that way." "It's okay, Mrs. Morrison." "It is not okay." The elderly woman's voice was firm, almost fierce. "Robert and I have been flying for 40 years. I have never seen a flight attendant speak to a passenger the way she's speaking to you. Never." Mr. Morrison nodded, his weathered face set in hard lines. "We're going to file a complaint when we land. This is discrimination, plain and simple." Zara felt a rush of gratitude for these strangers who saw what was happening and cared enough to say something. But she also felt a deep weariness. How many complaints had been filed against people like Sandra? And how many times did anything actually change? The flight continued and Sandra's behavior didn't improve. If anything, it got worse. More pointed. More deliberate. When she came through with the snack service, she skipped Zara entirely. Just pushed the cart right past her seat like she didn't exist. The Morrisons got warm nuts in small bowls. The businessman got cookies and chips in a basket. But Zara got nothing. Not even a glance. Carlos noticed and doubled back with a basket of snacks, his face tight with barely controlled anger. "I'm so sorry about that," he said quietly, offering Zara cookies and chips and pretzels. "This is not how we treat our passengers. Any of our passengers. It's not your fault, Mr. Martinez." But Carlos looked angry. Really angry. The kind of anger that came from watching someone abuse their power and being helpless to stop it because Sandra was his superior, because speaking up might cost him his job, because the system protected people like her and punished people like him. After the snack service, Sandra made another pass through the cabin, checking on passengers, refilling drinks, playing the role of the attentive flight attendant for everyone except Zara. She fawned over the Morrisons, asking about their trip, where they were going, if they needed extra pillows or blankets. She asked the businessman if he needed anything for his work, if the Wi-Fi was fast enough, if he wanted her to bring him another coffee. And when she got to Zara, she paused and looked down with barely disguised contempt. Can you afford to purchase anything from our in-flight menu? Or should I just move along? The question was so outrageously offensive that for a moment, no one could believe they'd heard it correctly. Mrs. Morrison gasped audibly, her hand flying to her mouth. Mr. Morrison's magazine slipped from his fingers. The businessman stood up again, and this time there was no politeness in his voice. Just raw fury. What did you just say to her? Sandra's mask slipped for just a moment, and Zara saw what was underneath. Not just prejudice but genuine malice. This woman didn't just think Zara didn't belong in first class. She actively resented her presence. She wanted to hurt her. I'm simply asking if the young lady has the means to make purchases. We accept credit cards only, no cash. Some passengers aren't aware of our policies. That is completely inappropriate, the businessman said, his voice rising. I'm a civil rights attorney, and what you're doing right now is discrimination. Pure and simple. And I'm documenting every word of this. Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to lower your voice and return to your seat. You're disturbing other passengers. I'm disturbing. The man looked around the cabin at the other passengers, all of whom were watching now. Is anyone here disturbed by me? Or are you all disturbed by how this flight attendant is treating a 10-year-old child? Several passengers murmured agreement. A woman across the aisle said, "This is disgraceful." Another man said, "I've never seen anything like this." Sandra's face flushed red, splotches of color appearing on her neck and cheeks. But she maintained her composure. Barely. If you all have a problem with how I perform my duties, I can have the captain land this plane at the nearest airport and have security remove anyone who continues to cause a disturbance. The threat hung in the air like a blade. She was willing to inconvenience an entire plane full of people, willing to delay everyone's travel, willing to cause chaos and expense and frustration, rather than admit she was wrong. Rather than treat a child with basic human decency. Zara had been sitting quietly through all of this, her hands folded in her lap, her face carefully blank. But now she spoke. Her voice was calm, but it cut through the tension like a knife through silk. "Ma'am, that won't be necessary. But I do need to inform you that your behavior is being documented and will be reported to the appropriate authorities when we land." Sandra actually laughed. It was a harsh, mocking sound that made several passengers flinch. Reported? To who, little girl? Your parents who couldn't even be bothered to fly with you? What kind of parents send a child to fly across the country alone? What kind of parents are too busy or too cheap to travel with their own daughter? The cabin went completely silent. Even the hum of the engine seemed to fade. Every eye was on Zara now, watching to see how this child would respond to such a cruel attack. Zara felt the words hit her like a physical blow. The implication that her parents didn't care about her, that she was somehow neglected or unwanted, that she was less than because she was traveling alone, it struck at the deepest wound she carried. Her mother was dead. Gone 2 years, and Zara still woke up some mornings forgetting, reaching for her phone to call Mama before reality crashed down. Her father was doing his best to raise a daughter alone while running a company and dealing with his own grief, trying to honor his wife's memory while also moving forward because life didn't stop just because your heart was broken. They loved her. They'd always loved her. Her mother had died doing what she loved, flying, and her father was teaching Zara to be strong because the world would demand strength from her every single day. Tears welled up in Zara's eyes, hot and shameful. She refused to let them fall. She would not cry. She would not give this woman the satisfaction of knowing how deeply her words had cut. When she spoke, her voice trembled slightly, but the words were clear and deliberate. "This is your first warning, Ms. Whitmore." Sandra leaned down, getting close to Zara's face, her breath smelling of coffee and mints. Her voice was low and poisonous, meant only for Zara but loud enough that the nearby passengers could hear. "Your first warning? What are you going to do, sweetheart? Tell your absentee parents? File a complaint that will go nowhere because no one cares what a child thinks? Little girls like you need to learn their place. And your place is not here." Mrs. Morrison stood up, her elderly frame shaking with rage. Her voice, when it came, was loud and commanding in a way that made everyone pay attention. "That is enough. Robert, get the captain. This woman needs to be removed from service immediately." But before Mr. Morrison could unbuckle his seatbelt, before anyone could move, Zara reached into the seat pocket in front of her and pulled out the in-flight phone. She held it up calmly. "I'd like to make a phone call, please." Sandra straightened up, a smirk playing at the corners of her mouth. That phone costs money to use, sweetheart. Quite a bit of money. Do you have a credit card? Zara reached into her small purse, the one her grandmother had given her last year with the embroidered flowers on the front. She pulled out a black American Express card. A Centurion card. The kind that didn't have a credit limit. The kind that required an invitation and a minimum of $250,000 in annual charges. The kind that most people would never see in their entire lives. She held it out to Sandra without a word. Sandra's smirk faltered as she took the card. She examined it closely, flipping it over, looking for evidence that it was fake, stolen, or borrowed. But the name embossed on the front was clear as day, Zara M. Richardson. Her hands trembled slightly as she ran the card through the machine. This is your card? Yes, ma'am. May I make my call now? Sandra, her face now pale, her earlier confidence evaporating, activated the phone and handed the receiver to Zara. She stepped back, and for the first time since boarding, there was uncertainty in her expression. A tiny seed of doubt. Zara dialed a number she knew by heart. It rang twice before a familiar voice answered, deep and warm and tinged with concern. Zara? Baby, are you okay? Just hearing her father's voice made Zara's carefully constructed composure crack slightly. She took a breath, steadying herself. Hi, Dad. Yes, I'm fine. But there's a situation on Flight 447. What kind of situation? Are you safe? Do I need to call the captain? Do I need to have the plane diverted? I'm safe, Dad. But there's a flight attendant who's been treating me inappropriately. Her name is Sandra Whitmore. I've tried to handle it myself, gave her opportunities to correct her behavior, but I think it's escalated beyond what I can manage alone. There was a pause. Zara could almost hear her father's mind working, his protective instincts warring with his commitment to letting Zara learn to handle difficult situations herself. He'd always believed in teaching her to fight her own battles, to be strong, to not need rescuing. But he was also her father, and hearing that someone had hurt his daughter made him want to move heaven and earth to make it right. How bad is it, princess? And be honest with me. Zara glanced at Sandra, who was standing a few feet away, trying to appear casual but clearly listening to every word. The businessman had his phone out now, recording. Mrs. Morrison had tears in her eyes. The cabin was so quiet you could hear the air circulation system. She questioned my right to sit in first class. She sent me to the back of the plane to use the restroom because the first-class ones weren't for people like me. She skipped me during service. She suggested I couldn't afford to make purchases. And she implied that you and Mama were bad parents for letting me fly alone. Another pause. Longer this time. When Marcus Richardson spoke again, his voice was cold as winter steel, each word precise and controlled. Put her on the phone. Now. I don't think that's necessary, Dad. I'm handling it. But I wanted you to know what was happening, and I wanted to give her one final chance to correct this before I take further action. Zara Marie Richardson. Her father used her full name, which he only did when he was deadly serious. Are you telling me you called to give this woman a warning? After everything she's done? Yes, sir. Like Mama used to say, everyone deserves a chance to be better. Everyone deserves grace, even when they don't deserve it. Marcus's laugh was short and without humor, but there was pride in it too. Pride mixed with pain because his daughter sounded so much like his late wife it hurt. Your mother was a better person than I am, baby girl. A better person than most people. But okay. Your call, princess. Just know that I'm one phone call away from grounding every plane in our fleet until this is handled. One phone call and I can have executives on that plane before you land. Say the word and it's done. I know, Dad. Thank you. I love you. Love you more than all the stars, baby. And Zara? Yes. I'm getting on a plane in about 2 hours. I'm coming to Atlanta. I'll be there before dinner. We'll go to Grandma Ruth's party together. Zara smiled, really smiled for the first time since boarding the plane. A genuine smile that reached her eyes and eased some of the tightness in her chest. You don't have to do that, Dad. I know Singapore is important. You're more important. Your mother would never forgive me if I let you handle this alone. See you soon, princess. Zara hung up the phone and handed it back to Sandra, who'd been standing there the whole time, her face growing progressively more pale with each word she'd overheard. My father says hello, Zara said calmly. Sandra's hand trembled as she took the phone. Her voice came out as barely more than a whisper. Your father? Yes, ma'am. He wanted to speak with you directly, but I told him I was handling the situation myself. I'm giving you a chance to improve your behavior for the remainder of this flight. That was your first warning. You get one more. Before Sandra could respond, before she could process what was happening, the intercom crackled to life. Captain Torres's voice filled the cabin, and this time there was no casual friendliness. Just authority. Flight attendants, please report to the galley immediately. Sandra and Carlos both moved toward the front of the plane, disappearing behind the curtain. The passengers in first class couldn't hear what was being said, but they could see Sandra's face through the gap in the curtain. She looked like she'd seen a ghost. Like the ground had opened up beneath her feet. Carlos emerged first, and his expression was a mixture of relief and vindication. He caught Zara's eye and gave her a small, sympathetic smile before heading back to work. Sandra stayed in the galley for a long time. When she finally returned to the cabin, she was different. Her professional mask was firmly in place, but there was something else underneath now. Fear. Uncertainty. The realization that she'd made a terrible mistake. She moved through the cabin without making eye contact with anyone, especially Zara. She stayed mostly in the galley, letting Carlos handle the first-class service while she hid. And the passengers noticed. The businessman leaned forward and spoke quietly to Zara. Miss Richardson, I want you to know that I witnessed everything that happened here today. My name is Daniel Carter, and I'm a civil rights attorney based in Atlanta. If you or your father need witnesses for any formal proceedings, any lawsuits, any complaints to the FAA, I'll be happy to provide testimony. Thank you, Mr. Carter. That's very kind. It's not kindness. It's justice. What happened here today was wrong on every level. That woman should never work with the public again. Mrs. Morrison leaned across the aisle, her eyes still wet with tears. Sweetheart, can I ask you something? Yes, ma'am. Who exactly is your father? I mean, I know you said his name is Marcus Richardson, but... Zara hesitated. She'd been taught not to brag about her family's wealth or her father's accomplishments. Taught that privilege was something to be used responsibly, not flaunted. But these people had stood up for her. They deserved the truth. My father is Marcus Richardson. He runs Richardson Aviation Group. Mrs. Morrison's eyes went wide. Mr. Morrison actually dropped the magazine he picked back up. Marcus Richardson? The Marcus Richardson who owns 3 airlines, yes ma'am. Including this one. Oh my God, Mrs. Morrison breathed. And that woman treated you like, oh my dear God. The businessman, Daniel Carter, leaned back in his seat with something like awe on his face. You own this airline. And she sent you to the back to use the bathroom. My father owns it. I'm just a passenger. A 10-year-old passenger who wanted to visit her grandmother. But even as she said it, Zara knew it wasn't quite true. She wasn't just a passenger. After her mother died, Marcus had done something unprecedented. He'd put Zara on the board of directors of Richardson Aviation Group. Made her the youngest board member in aviation history. She needs to understand this business, he told the other board members, most of whom had been skeptical. She needs to know how it works, what decisions we make, why we make them. This company will be hers someday. She needs to be ready. So Zara attended board meetings via video call. She reviewed reports. She asked questions. She learned about profit margins and safety regulations and labor negotiations and customer service standards. She'd fought hard for better treatment of passengers. For more training for flight attendants on unconscious bias. For policies that protected vulnerable travelers. And here she was, experiencing firsthand the kind of treatment she'd been trying to eliminate. The irony wasn't lost on her. The rest of the flight passed in relative quiet. Carlos brought Zara a proper meal, served on real china with actual silverware, and he went out of his way to be kind. I'm so sorry for what happened, he said quietly, kneeling beside her seat. I should have done more to stop it. It's not your fault, Mr. Martinez. You were kind to me from the beginning. That matters. Still, I've worked with Sandra for 3 years and I've seen her. I've seen her treat people differently based on how they look, where they're from. But I've never seen it this bad. Never this blatant. Has anyone ever complained about her before? Carlos looked uncomfortable. Yes. But the complaints never went anywhere. People would file them and then nothing would happen. Sandra has friends in management. Or she did. I don't think that's going to help her this time. After Carlos walked away, Zara pulled out her tablet and tried to focus on her homework, but her mind kept wandering. She thought about her mother, about what Jennifer would have done in this situation. Her mother had faced discrimination her entire career. A black woman pilot in an industry dominated by white men. She'd been questioned, doubted, passed over for promotions, subjected to comments and looks and assumptions every single day. But she'd never let it make her bitter. She'd never let it steal her joy or her grace. Baby girl, she used to say, hurt people hurt people. When someone treats you badly, it's usually because they're carrying their own pain. That doesn't make it okay. That doesn't mean you have to accept it. But it means you can respond with strength instead of cruelty. You can demand better without becoming like them. Zara understood that now in a way she hadn't before. Sandra Whitmore was hurt. Something in her life, something in her past, had made her bitter and resentful. Had made her lash out at a child because that child represented something she couldn't have or couldn't be. That didn't excuse what Sandra had done. But it explained it. And understanding, even without forgiveness, was a kind of power. As the plane began its descent into Atlanta, Zara looked out the window at the city spreading out below. She could see the airport in the distance, the runways like ribbons of concrete, planes taking off and landing in an endless ballet of controlled chaos. Her mother had loved this view. Loved seeing the world from above, where everything looked small and manageable and beautiful. The plane touched down smoothly, and Captain Torres's voice came over the intercom one last time. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Atlanta. Local time is 2:47 p.m. For those of you continuing on, please remain in your seats. For those of you deplaning in Atlanta, thank you for flying with us today. But then he added something unusual. Before we taxi to the gate, I need all passengers to please remain seated. We have a special situation that needs to be addressed. Confusion rippled through the cabin. People looked at each other, wondering what was happening. Was there a security threat? A medical emergency? The plane pulled up to the gate and stopped. The seatbelt sign turned off, but the door didn't open. They sat there for several long minutes, the cabin growing warm and stuffy, passengers shifting restlessly in their seats. And then the forward door opened and Marcus Richardson stepped onto the plane. He was a big man, 6'3", broad-shouldered, with the kind of presence that made people pay attention. He wore an expensive suit that fit perfectly, and his face was set in hard lines. But when his eyes found Zara, everything softened. He walked straight to her seat and Zara unbuckled and stood to meet him. He knelt down, wrapping his arms around his daughter, holding her tight like he was afraid she might disappear. "I'm sorry I wasn't here," he said quietly, his voice thick with emotion. "I'm so sorry, baby girl." "You're here now," Zara said, and her own voice cracked. She'd been so strong, so controlled, so careful not to cry. But now, in her father's arms, she felt safe enough to let the tears come. They stayed like that for a long moment while the entire cabin watched in silence. And then Marcus stood, keeping one hand on Zara's shoulder, and turned to face the other passengers. Behind him, airline executives, HR representatives, and 2 security guards had boarded the plane. Marcus's voice was calm but carried through the cabin like thunder. "I'm Marcus Richardson, owner of Richardson Aviation Group. I understand there was an incident on this flight involving my daughter and a member of my crew. I want to start by apologizing to every passenger on this aircraft. What happened here today is unacceptable and does not reflect the values of this company or the standards we hold our employees to." He looked toward the galley where Sandra had appeared, her face white as paper. "Ms. Whitmore, is it?" Sandra couldn't speak. She just nodded, her hands trembling. "My daughter gave you multiple warnings. She tried to handle this situation with grace and patience. She gave you chances to be better. Do you know why she did that?" Sandra shook her head. "Because her mother taught her that everyone deserves a chance to change. Even when they don't deserve it. Even when they've been cruel. My wife believed in second chances. She believed in redemption." Marcus paused, his jaw working as he fought to control his emotions. Talking about Jennifer was still hard even after 2 years. "But my daughter also understands that there have to be consequences for our actions. You humiliated a child. You discriminated against a passenger based on her age and her race. You abused your position of authority. And in doing so, you violated every policy this company has about customer service, diversity, and basic human decency." He turned to the executives behind him. "Ms. Whitmore is terminated, effective immediately. Security will escort her off this plane, and HR will be in contact regarding final procedures." Sandra found her voice then, and it came out as a broken plea. "Please, Mr. Richardson, I didn't know who she was. I didn't know." "You didn't need to know who she was," Marcus cut her off, his voice sharp as a blade. "You needed to treat a child with basic human dignity and respect. You failed. Not because you didn't know she was my daughter. Not because you didn't know her family owned this airline. You failed because you chose cruelty over kindness. You chose prejudice over professionalism." Sandra was crying now, mascara running down her face. "Please, I need this job. I have bills I have." You should have thought about that before you decided to torment a 10-year-old child. But then Zara tugged on her father's sleeve. She looked up at him with those serious dark eyes, so much like her mother's. Dad, can I say something? Marcus looked down at his daughter, surprised. Of course, princess. Zara stepped forward, and suddenly she was the center of attention. Every eye in the cabin was on this small girl who'd endured so much with such quiet strength. Ms. Whitmore, Zara said, and her voice was steady now. The tears were gone. I wanted you fired. When I made that phone call, when I gave you that warning, part of me wanted to see you lose everything. Because you hurt me. You made me feel small and unwanted. You attacked my family, my parents who love me more than anything in the world. Sandra couldn't look at her. She stared at the floor, shoulders shaking. But I've been thinking about something my mama used to say. She said that hurt people hurt people. And I think you must be hurting a lot inside to treat someone the way you treated me today. Mrs. Morrison had tears streaming down her face now. Daniel Carter, the attorney, was watching with something like awe. I don't know what made you this way, Zara continued. I don't know what pain you're carrying or what made you so bitter. But I know that losing your job won't make you less bitter. It'll make it worse. It'll give you one more reason to be angry at the world. The cabin was so quiet you could hear people breathing. So I'm not going to recommend termination. Marcus made a sound of surprise. The executives behind him looked shocked. Even Sandra looked up, her face a mask of disbelief. But, Zara held up one finger, I am recommending mandatory sensitivity training. Comprehensive training on unconscious bias, on customer service, on treating all passengers with dignity regardless of their age, race, or how they look. I'm recommending a formal apology, written and delivered in person, to every passenger on this flight who witnessed what happened. And I'm recommending a year of probation. 1 year where your performance is monitored closely. If there's even one more complaint, just one, then termination. No second chances after this. She looked directly at Sandra now, and her voice was firm. You get one more chance, Ms. Whitmore. Don't waste it. Use it to be better. Use it to heal whatever's broken inside you that made you think it was okay to treat people this way. Marcus was staring at his daughter like he'd never seen her before. The executives were frantically making notes. The passengers were absolutely silent. Sandra collapsed into one of the jump seats, sobbing. Thank you, she gasped out between tears. Thank you. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Marcus turned to his team. You heard her. Make it happen. All of it. And I want weekly reports on Ms. Whitmore's progress. If she steps one toe out of line, she's done. He looked at Sandra. My daughter just gave you a gift you don't deserve. I suggest you spend every day of the next year proving you're worthy of it. Then he turned to the cabin, addressing all the passengers. To everyone on this flight, I apologize again for what you witnessed. Your tickets will be refunded in full, and you'll each receive credit for a free round-trip flight anywhere our airlines operate. It's a small gesture, but it's the least we can do. Captain Torres emerged from the cockpit, and Marcus shook his hand. Captain, thank you for your professionalism in handling this situation. I know you tried to intervene. Your daughter handled herself with more grace than most adults, sir. She's remarkable. She's her mother's daughter, Marcus said, and his voice cracked slightly on the words. The passengers began to deplane, and many of them stopped to speak to Zara. Mrs. Morrison hugged her tightly, whispering, You're going to change the world, sweetheart. Mark my words. Mr. Morrison shook her hand formally. It was an honor to witness your strength today, young lady. Daniel Carter handed her his business card. If you ever need anything, call me. What you did today, showing that kind of mercy when you could have chosen revenge, that takes real courage. The young mother from coach had heard what happened and made her way to first class, her baby on her hip. She had tears in her eyes. Thank you, she said to Zara. 3 months ago, that same woman made me feel 2 inches tall on a different flight. Made comments about my baby crying, suggested I shouldn't fly if I couldn't control my child. I wanted to complain, but I was scared. Scared no one would believe me. Scared I'd get in trouble somehow. Thank you for standing up. For all of us. Even the college student, the one with the social justice stickers on his laptop, approached. I got everything on video, he said. Time-stamped, clear audio. I was going to post it, make it go viral. But... He looked at Zara with respect. I think I'll delete it instead. This story doesn't need social media. It needs to live in our hearts. What you did, giving her a second chance, that's the kind of thing that actually changes people. Zara felt overwhelmed by all the attention, all the praise. She wasn't used to being seen. Her father had always taught her to move quietly through the world, to let her actions speak louder than her name. When the plane was finally empty except for Zara, Marcus, and the crew, Carlos approached. "Miss Richardson, sir, I just want to say it was an honor to serve you today. And I'm sorry I didn't do more to stop what was happening." Zara smiled at him. "You were kind to me from the beginning, Mr. Martinez. That mattered more than you know." Marcus pulled out his phone and made a quick call. "Get me Carlos Martinez's employee file. I want to see his performance reviews." He looked at Carlos. "You showed integrity today. That's rare. How would you feel about a promotion?" Carlos looked stunned. "Sir, I don't know what to say." "Say yes. We need more people like you in leadership positions. People who see injustice and want to stop it, even when it's uncomfortable." As they walked off the plane, Zara carrying her small suitcase, her hand in her father's, she felt different. Older somehow. Like she'd crossed some invisible threshold and couldn't go back. Marcus had a car waiting, and they drove toward Grandma Ruth's house in comfortable silence for a while. Then Marcus spoke. "Your mother would have been so proud of you today, Zara. So incredibly proud." "You think so?" "I know so. The way you stood up for yourself but also showed compassion. The way you demanded justice but also offered grace. That's exactly what she would have done." Zara looked out the window at Atlanta passing by. "I almost told you to fire her, you know. Part of me wanted to." "I know. And no one would have blamed you if you had. But then I thought about Mama. About how she always said that breaking the cycle of hurt was the only way things get better. If I'd gotten Ms. Whitmore fired, she would have just been more bitter. More resentful. More likely to take it out on the next person who reminded her of whatever pain she's carrying. That's very wise, baby girl. But it's also a heavy burden to carry. You shouldn't have to be the one who teaches grown adults how to be decent human beings. Maybe not. But if I have the power to make someone better instead of just punishing them, isn't that what I should do?" Marcus pulled the car over to the side of the road and turned to face his daughter. "Zara, listen to me. You are 10 years old. You should be worried about homework and friends and what game you're going to play at recess. You shouldn't have to carry the weight of other people's prejudice and pain. But I do carry it. Whether I want to or not. Because I'm black. Because I'm young. Because people look at me and make assumptions. Mama taught me that I can either let that break me or I can use it to make me stronger. Your mama also taught you that you don't have to fix everyone. That sometimes the strongest thing you can do is walk away." "I know. But Dad? I didn't want to walk away from this. I wanted to show Ms. Whitmore that she was wrong about me. About us. About what kind of people we are." Marcus pulled his daughter into another hug, and they sat there on the side of the road while cars rushed past and the Atlanta afternoon sun beat down on the windshield. "You are the best thing your mother and I ever made," he said quietly. "And I'm sorry that the world makes you grow up so fast. I'm sorry I can't protect you from all the Sandra Whitmores out there. You can't protect me from them. But you taught me how to handle them. You and Mama both. You taught me to be strong. To be smart. To be strategic. And you taught me that grace is more powerful than anger." They drove the rest of the way to Grandma Ruth's house, and when they pulled up, the whole family was waiting. Cousins and aunts and uncles and friends, all gathered to celebrate Ruth Richardson's 80th birthday. Grandma Ruth stood on the porch, a tiny woman with white hair and eyes that missed nothing. When she saw Zara, her face lit up like the sun. "There's my beautiful girl." Zara ran to her grandmother and was enveloped in arms that smelled like vanilla and cinnamon and home. "Happy birthday, Grandma." "Thank you, baby. But the real gift is having you here. Come inside, everyone's waiting." The party was loud and joyful, full of music and laughter and food that filled every surface of the kitchen. Zara was passed from relative to relative, hugged and kissed and asked about school and friends and whether she had a boyfriend yet, which made her roll her eyes. But eventually she found herself sitting on the back porch with her grandmother, watching the sun set over the Atlanta skyline. Marcus was inside talking with his brothers, and for a moment, it was just Zara and Ruth. "Your daddy told me what happened on the plane," Ruth said quietly. Zara nodded but didn't say anything. "You did good, baby. Real good. Showed that woman more mercy than she deserved. That's what Mama would have wanted." Ruth took Zara's hand in her own weathered one. "Your Mama was special. She had a light in her that couldn't be dimmed, no matter how hard the world tried. And you have that same light, Zara. I see it shining in you every day. Sometimes I'm scared I'm going to forget her. Forget what her voice sounded like or how she smelled or the way she laughed. You won't forget. She's part of you, baby. In your bones and your blood and your spirit. Every kind thing you do, every time you choose grace over anger, every time you stand up for what's right, that's your Mama living on through you." Zara leaned her head on her grandmother's shoulder and let the tears come. Not sad tears this time, but the kind of tears that come from releasing something you've been holding too tight. Inside, someone started playing the piano and voices rose in song. Old hymns and gospel songs that had been sung in this house for generations. Music that carried joy and pain and hope all mixed together. "Come on," Ruth said, standing and pulling Zara up with her. "It's my birthday and I want to dance with my favorite granddaughter." "I'm your only granddaughter, Grandma. Which makes you both my favorite and my least favorite. Now come dance with me before I'm too old to move." They went inside and Zara let herself be swept up in the celebration. Let herself be a child again, at least for tonight. Dancing with her grandmother, eating too much cake, laughing at her uncle's terrible jokes, feeling safe and loved and seen. But later, after the party had wound down and most of the guests had gone home, after Zara had changed into her pajamas and brushed her teeth, she found herself standing in front of the guest room mirror, looking at her reflection. She thought about the girl who'd boarded that plane this morning. That girl had been confident, prepared, ready to handle whatever came her way. But she'd also been naive in some ways. She'd believed that if you were polite enough, smart enough, well-behaved enough, you could avoid prejudice. You could make people see you clearly. Now she knew better. She knew that some people would always look at her and see only her skin color. Only her age. Only their own assumptions and fears and insecurities projected onto her. But she also knew something else. She knew she had power. Real power. Not just because her father owned airlines or because her family had money, but because she had the power to choose how she responded to cruelty. The power to demand better while also offering grace. The power to be both strong and kind, both firm and forgiving. Her mother had died flying, doing what she loved, defying gravity through sheer will and skill and determination. And Zara was her mother's daughter. She would defy the gravity of low expectations. She would rise above the prejudice and the doubt and the people who tried to make her small. Not with anger. Not with bitterness. But with the kind of quiet strength that changed the world one interaction at a time. There was a soft knock on the door and her father poked his head in. "Hey, princess. You should be asleep." "I know. I just couldn't stop thinking." Marcus came in and sat on the edge of the bed. "About what?" "About everything. About Mama. About what happened today. About what happens next." "What do you mean, what happens next?" Zara climbed into bed and pulled the covers up to her chin. "Ms. Whitmore gets training and probation. But what about all the other Ms. Whitmores out there? The ones who don't get caught. The ones who are more subtle. The ones who make people feel small in ways that can't be documented or proven." Marcus was quiet for a long moment. "I don't know, baby girl. I wish I had an answer. I wish I could tell you that what you did today will fix everything. But all we can do is keep trying. Keep demanding better. Keep showing people what grace and strength look like." "That's what you're doing, isn't it? With the company. With the diversity training and the new policies." "I'm trying. We all are. But change is slow. Sometimes painfully slow. Mama used to say that every flight starts with a single step toward the plane." Marcus smiled. "She did say that. Usually right before we were running late for a flight she'd booked too close to our previous appointment." They both laughed and it felt good. It felt like healing. "Get some sleep, Zara. Tomorrow's a new day." "Dad." "Yeah. Thank you for coming. For being here. I know you had important meetings. You're the most important thing in my life. Always. No meeting, no business deal, no amount of money is more important than you. Don't ever forget that." He kissed her forehead and turned off the light, leaving the door cracked open just the way Zara liked it. Zara lay in the dark, listening to the sounds of her grandmother's house settling for the night. The old wood floors creaking. The wind chimes on the porch singing in the breeze. Her father's voice downstairs, talking quietly with Grandma Ruth. She thought about Sandra Whitmore, wondering if the woman was home right now, thinking about what had happened. Wondering if she understood how close she'd come to losing everything. Wondering if she would take this second chance and actually become better, or if she would just learn to hide her prejudice more carefully. Zara hoped it was the former. She genuinely hoped that Sandra would do the work, examine her biases, figure out where her pain came from and start to heal it. Because that was the only way anything really changed. Not through punishment but through transformation. She thought about all the passengers who'd witnessed what happened. Daniel Carter, who'd offered to testify. Mrs. Morrison, who'd stood up even though it wasn't her fight. Carlos, who'd tried to make things right even though he'd been powerless to stop his superior. The college student who'd chosen to delete his video instead of making it go viral. They'd all seen something today. They'd all been changed by it, even if only a little bit. And maybe that was enough. Maybe you didn't change the world all at once. Maybe you changed it one person at a time, one interaction at a time, one moment of choosing grace over anger. Zara closed her eyes and let sleep start to pull her under. But before she drifted off completely, she whispered into the darkness. I hope I made you proud today, Mama. I tried to be like you. I tried to be strong and kind at the same time. I tried to remember that everyone's carrying something heavy, even the people who hurt us. She could almost feel her mother's presence in the room. Almost hear her voice. You did perfect, baby girl. You did perfect. And Zara slept. 3 weeks later, Zara received a letter in the mail. It was handwritten on simple stationery, and the handwriting was shaky, like the person had written and rewritten it several times before settling on the final version. Dear Miss Richardson, I don't know if you'll read this or if you'll throw it away without opening it. I wouldn't blame you if you did. But I had to try. I want to start by saying I'm sorry. I know those words aren't enough. They can't undo what I did or how I made you feel. But they're all I have and they're true. I've been going to the training sessions that your father mandated. At first, I went because I had to, because it was the only way to keep my job. But something happened in those sessions. I started to see myself. Really see myself. I grew up poor in rural Georgia. My daddy was a drunk who left when I was 6. My mama worked 3 jobs to keep food on the table and she was angry all the time. Angry at my daddy for leaving. Angry at the world for being so hard. And she taught me to be angry too. She taught me that the world was divided into people who had things and people who didn't, and that the people who had things got them by taking from people like us. She taught me to be suspicious, resentful, always looking for the slight or the insult. I carried that into my adult life, into my career. I became the thing my mother was. Bitter. Resentful. Taking out my pain on people who reminded me of everything I didn't have and couldn't be. When I saw you that day dressed nice, confident, sitting in first class like you belonged there, I saw everything I never got to be. I saw a child who was loved and cared for and given opportunities. And instead of being happy for you, I hated you for it. That's the truth. That's the ugly, shameful truth. But in these training sessions, I've started to understand that my pain doesn't give me the right to hurt other people. That the things my mother taught me were her wounds, not truth. That I have a choice about who I want to be. I'm not saying I'm fixed. I'm not saying 3 weeks of training has erased 40 years of learned behavior. But I'm trying. Really trying. I think about you every day. About your grace. About how you could have destroyed me but chose to give me a chance instead. I don't understand that kind of mercy. I've never seen it before. But I'm grateful for it. I hope you're well. I hope you're happy. I hope you know that you changed my life that day, though probably not in the way you expected. You showed me what strength really looks like. And I'm trying every day to be worthy of the gift you gave me. Sincerely, Sandra Whitmore. Zara read the letter 3 times. Then she folded it carefully and put it in the box where she kept important things. Photos of her mother. Cards from her grandmother. Her mother's pilot wings. She didn't know if Sandra Whitmore would really change. She didn't know if the woman's transformation was genuine or if she'd slip back into old patterns when the pressure was off. But she knew that she'd done the right thing. That giving someone a chance to be better was never wrong, even if they didn't take it. Even if they wasted it. Because grace wasn't about whether someone deserved it. It was about who you chose to be in the face of cruelty. And Zara chose to be her mother's daughter. Years later, when Zara was grown and running Richardson Aviation Group herself, she would think back to that day often. To the flight attendant who tried to make her feel small. To the passengers who'd stood up for her. To the decision she'd made to offer grace instead of revenge. She would tell the story to new employees during orientation. Not to shame anyone but to illustrate the kind of company they worked for. The kind of values they upheld. We're in the business of moving people, she would say. Not just from one place to another but forward in their lives. Every passenger who boards our planes is trusting us with more than just their physical safety. They're trusting us with their dignity. With their humanity. And we don't get to decide who deserves that trust based on how they look or where they're from or how old they are. She would watch the new employees nod, some of them moved to tears by the story. And she would think about her mother, about the woman who'd taught her that strength and kindness weren't opposites but partners. About the woman who'd shown her that you could stand up for yourself while also extending grace to those who hurt you. About the woman who died doing what she loved, but who lived on in every choice Zara made to be better, to demand better, to show the world what real power looked like. And in those moments, standing in front of rooms full of people, carrying on her mother's legacy and her father's work, Zara would feel her mother's presence as clearly as she had that night in her grandmother's house. You did perfect, baby girl. You did perfect. The truth is we all carry pain. All of us. And we all have a choice about what we do with that pain. We can let it make us bitter, resentful, small. We can use it as an excuse to hurt others, to make them feel as small as we feel. Or we can transform it. We can take that pain and turn it into compassion, into understanding, into the kind of strength that lifts others up instead of tearing them down. Zara Richardson understood that at 10 years old. She understood that the flight attendant who tried to diminish her was fighting her own battles, carrying her own wounds. And she chose grace. Not because it was easy. Not because it felt good in the moment. But because it was right. Because her mother had taught her that breaking cycles of hurt was the only way the world got better. One person at a time. One choice at a time. One moment of grace at a time. So the next time someone tries to make you feel small, remember Zara. Remember that you have the power to respond with strength and kindness at the same time. That you can demand respect while also offering grace. That you can be both steel and silk. Both unbending and forgiving. That's not weakness. That's the truest form of power. That's how we change the world. If this story moved you, if it made you think about how you respond to prejudice and pain, share it. Let it remind someone else that they have the power to choose grace. That they have the power to be better than the worst thing anyone's ever done to them. And if you want more stories like this, stories that show the quiet power, the unshakable grace, the brilliant strength of people who refuse to let the world make them small, subscribe. Because these stories matter. These voices matter. Your voice matters. Remember that the next time someone tries to tell you otherwise,